Good morning, everyone. It's Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Cove here, and today we're doing not a Kickstarter roundup, but rather a Kickstarter look back. I've been doing these videos now for a while, these roundups, these Kickstarters, the ones I'm backing, the ones I'm not backing, the reasons why or why not, and it occurred to me that it would be interesting not just to see what I am backing and why, but rather to see what has happened, what I've backed in the past. Have I kept it? Have I sold it? Have I traded it? Have I enjoyed it? Did I sell it at a profit? Did I take a loss in it? Do I regret my decision? All those questions. And do I regret my decision both from should I have known better at the time, as well as what do I think now in retrospect? I thought it'd be interesting to go through those. Now, before we can do that, though, unfortunately, we first have to go through my prior Kickstarters, the Kickstarters I backed before I started looking at them through the perspective of a value proposition, through the perspective of I want to start backing a lot of things, so I have to ensure that I'm picking things that will not break the bank, things that I'll either keep and love, or things that I'll be able to trade away or sell and recoup my costs. So this first video is going to basically cover 2014 through 2018, which is all the Kickstarters I backed in those years. There's not a ton. There's around 10 or so that I've backed in that time. And none of them did I look through the lens of value proposition, but rather I looked through, I want it, should I buy it, and get them. But let's go over them. I'll go over each one, and then I'll cover as well which ones I've kept, which ones I've enjoyed, what I think, all that stuff. So, starting off the bat, in 2014, I have two Kickstarters that I backed. The first was Flashpoint Fire Rescue Extreme Danger. I really enjoyed Flashpoint when I first played it. I thought it was great. I still think it's great. I no longer own regular Flashpoint. I got rid of it over time as more and more cooperative games joined my collection. I got into gaming 2011, 2012, so this was still pretty new. This is back in 2014. And I still only had relatively a few games. So over time, as I acquired more and more cooperative games, Flashpoint eventually didn't make the cut for me. While it is great, and while I think it is a game worth playing, a game worth trying, it lacked the elegance that Pandemic has and other cooperative games over time that I started playing. And in the end, I got rid of it, but not before basically getting every single expansion that came out, every single opportunity to buy every map, the fireman figures, whatever they had, I tried to get over time. Now, Flashpoint was a good game, don't get me wrong, in terms of the value. Again, first of all, I got rid of this, and second of all, is this one I actually not sure about the value proposition, meaning they gave you a decent amount of extras in the game that it may well have been worth it. I don't recall what I did with this. I don't recall if I traded it, if I sold it. That's going to be true for a bunch of these, unfortunately, but this is one that was great. I don't have any regrets about backing it. I used it and played it a lot. This was probably back when I played games more than I do now in terms of not the sheer quantity of games, but I had repeat plays more than I did now. I got a lot of enjoyment out of this. I played this with my wife a lot. This was primarily back when I played only two-player games for a while, and I really enjoyed this one quite a bit. It was a great game, but again, eventually I got rid of it, and yeah, that's basically it. Next up, we have Alien Frontiers Factions. Alien Frontiers is another game that I really enjoyed playing with my wife. I played it primarily two players. I do not believe it's best with two, but I played it primarily two players with my wife. I enjoyed the overall game. The overall tableau building works well. The area control aspect in the middle, you really want a third or fourth player in the mix. Alien Frontiers is another game that I thought was amazing. There was a time when this was my top 10 games and would never have left my collection. But over time, it did leave my collection. Over time, it started hitting a point where it was a great game that's so amazing, that's so incredible, but that I never pulled off the shelf and never had the desire to pull off the shelf, which I think is more noteworthy. I stopped even wanting to pull it off, and it's like, oh, it's a great game, but I don't want to play it. And so eventually I traded it away. But again, similar to Flashpoint, along the way, I tried to get everything I could. I tried to get every promo, every expansion, everything I could for the game. And this is another one. I don't know whether I got my money back or not. I don't recall. I probably traded it. This is back. I did more trading than selling back then, and I probably traded it away in the end. But along the way, I enjoyed it. So that's basically 2014. So far, we're 0 for 2 in games we kept, but no real regrets just yet. In 2015, we have 4 Kickstarters. Starting us off the bat, we have The Resistance, Hostile Intent, and Hidden Agenda. This is one I do regret, unfortunately. I got this because at the time, I mentioned that I was primarily playing two players, and that's true to an extent. At the same time, we did have a group of non-gamers that loved playing Resistance Avalon with us. So we had weekly games of Resistance Avalon. We thoroughly enjoyed playing it. We played it a ton every single week. almost every single week. And so when this came out, I was like, great. The one thing I've been missing from regular Resistance was the Avalon rolls. And Resistance Hidden Intent Hostile Agenda added that aspect to the game. It added those hidden rolls. So I figured I'll get it, I'll play it, I'll enjoy it, we'll see what happens. I never got to the table. Resistance Avalon always fulfilled our needs. I have no idea if this is good or not good. This guy kind of looks like the guy from Hunger Games, that evil overlord. Anyway, side point. But yeah, I still don't know to this day if it's a better game than Avalon, a worse game than Avalon. I still own Resistance Avalon. It's a game that we don't play weekly anymore, but it's a game that when we do play it, we love it. There is an online version, by the way. For those of you stuck at home and you caught a land, or not you caught in quarantine land and you're looking for online games, if you like Resistance Avalon, go ahead and Google it. There is an online version. Obviously, I recommend playing it over Zoom as well. I can't imagine playing a game like this without that facial aspect, and even then it does lose something. But if you like Resistance, it's something worth noting. You can Google that. But past that, yeah, I regret it not from a stance of the value, but I regret it from a stance of it was a game that didn't hit the table, and I don't know if it ever would have hit the table. We enjoyed Avalon, we didn't feel the need to diverge from that, and we weren't playing, I guess we were playing enough we could have, but we just never did. That's Resistance. Next up in 2015, we have One Night Ultimate Werewolf Daybreak. This is the expansion to One Night Ultimate Werewolf. We already had One Night Ultimate Werewolf. As I said, with that group, we really enjoyed Resistance. We did branch out a bit into One Night Ultimate Werewolf. Interestingly enough, it actually was not a hit with that group, but it is a game that I thoroughly enjoyed, and a few people in the group thoroughly enjoyed, and we kind of started this branch-off group of people who played One Night Ultimate Werewolf. And that group is the starting point of my gaming group that we started in sometime in 2015, I think. I don't recall exactly. But in any case, on One Night Ultimate Werewolf, to me, I prefer it to Resistance Avalon. Other people in my group, we go back and forth, we argue, we have different opinions here. For me, one of the things I love about One Night Ultimate Werewolf is the fact that it takes that hidden traitor aspect, but it takes away the tenseness of the first game. It takes away the pressure of the first game, because the first thing I tell people about this game is in One Night Ultimate Werewolf, you can be lying, and it doesn't mean you're bad. That is a huge point, and it takes the pressure off of lying for new players. In Avalon, there is no reason to ever lie. If you lie in Resistance, you're a bad guy. It's plain and simple. But if you lie in One Night Ultimate Werewolf, you're still just trying to figure out what happened, and that takes away a lot of the pressure for new gamers. Additionally, combine that with the fact that it's an 8-minute timer. You can adjust the timer, but it's basically an 8-minute game, whereas Resistance can be 15 to 40 minutes, or whatever it is, and there's a firm clock on that game. If you get stuck in a bad game, it's over in 8 minutes. In Resistance Avalon, you can kind of be revealed early on, and you can be stuck there for 25 minutes, or whatever it is. I love One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I backed the One Night Ultimate Werewolf Daybreak. I'm really happy with it. No regrets whatsoever. Next in 2015, we have One Night Resistance. Now, One Night Resistance, again, you can see a trend here. I was going for all these one-night games. I was enjoying I don't know if I was enjoying what they're adding, but I like the general hidden traitor aspect to games, and was backing all these things by Indie Boards and Cards, as well as by Bezier Games it was. I think it's Bezier Games. I can't find Bezier Games, yes. So, One Night Resistance is a game that I backed for the obvious reason. Same thing, a combination of the genres, the best of both worlds. Total regret here. It turns out it's the worst of both worlds. This game was basically a flop. It seems it's not a game I ever ended up playing myself. Once all the reviews started coming in, once everyone started talking about, well, that it wasn't great. It basically was not the best of both worlds. It was jack of all trades, master of none. So I kind of ended up passing on this and trading it away eventually without ever getting it to the table. I read the rules weren't inspiring, combined that with the negative reviews, and it just left. This is definitely a game that was not a good back. I mean, it's $25 or whatnot for the basic pledge. You can buy this for $8 now. It's a game that's on everyone's trade list and very few people's want list. Next in 2015, the fourth one and last in 2015, is Coup Rebellion. Coup Rebellion, again, this trend here, my group really enjoyed Coup. We love the simple bluffing aspect to Coup. We still have Coup. I still enjoy Coup. It doesn't hit the table nearly as much, but it has a small enough shelf space and a specific enough time that I pull it out that I'm happy to keep it. I think Skull has replaced it as my go-to straight-up bluffing game, but there is something about Coup that I still keep, that I still enjoy, and still make sure that it hits the table. Coup Rebellion was more of the same, so I decided to, of course, jump all in. Coup Rebellion is another one that I sadly regret, both in terms of the cost. I guess the cost probably wasn't that bad in retrospect, but again, I wasn't looking at this from a stance of, which games will have their value hold over time, which games are likely to sell for more or not. And Coup Rebellion sadly took the elegance of Coup and just bloated it in a way that didn't work. One of the things that I love about Coup, one of the things that works best about Coup, is the fact that there's these 5 roles that they easily counter each other in different ways, so there's an elegance to the game. The problem is when you introduce new roles, it changes up the entire nature of the game, because in order to have the variability of picking whatever role you want, they couldn't just have different roles counter each other in a way, in a rock, paper, scissors kind of format that worked excellently. Instead, they have the situation where a role counters itself, which just felt ham-fisted. It did not feel ideal, it didn't feel elegant. It felt like they took the power aspect of Coup, which is nice, and then twisted it into a non-elegant gameplay system and stripped of all the elegance in the rock, paper, scissors that the original had. I really enjoy original Coup. Coup Rebellion is one that we played once or twice and then we moved on from. And that covers 2015. So far for 2015, we are 1 for 4. We've kept one at Ultimate Werewolf Daybreak, and the rest have gone, which brings us to 2016. 2016 starts off with Santorini. If you watched my couples video, I'll link to it up above. Santorini is a game that is still in my collection. If you watched that video, you know that already. It is a game that I thoroughly enjoy. It does not hit the table as much as it used to, but I still pull it out with random people. I pull it out with my friends, my wife, my daughter. Not with my son so much, although they do enjoy playing with the pieces. They enjoy constructing castles, but I don't play with them. But this is a game that is... Well, also might note that my daughter has really enjoyed it even more now that she started reading Percy Jackson. So now she notices all the gods, and she recognizes all the gods, and she's so much more excited. She's like, ooh, Aphrodite, we should play Aphrodite versus, I don't know, whatever, Zeus or whoever. Santorini is an excellent game that simultaneously I think I overpaid for, given the fact that Santorini itself is available pretty cheaply nowadays. It's available for like $20 pretty much anywhere, and it's a great game, don't get me wrong. I have no regrets about backing this. I do debate whether I overpaid. Also, this was the first game, I believe, by Roxley Games, which launched them as a Kickstarter. I think it was their first. Give me a second, I'll check. Let's see over here. If we go to Roxley Games and click on this over here, we should see their games that they put out. I think this was their first Kickstarter. Created 6. Roxley Games has done a whole bunch of Kickstarters. Oh no, they started with Steampunk Rally. I did not realize that. I thought Santorini was their first game. In any case, so Santorini, I guess Roxley Games started with Steampunk Rally. They produce beautiful games, absolutely beautiful games, and they are not the last time that you're going to see them on this list. But Santorini is an excellent 2-player game. It has a table presence like almost no, well, I'm not gonna say like no other. It has an excellent table presence, possibly a table presence like no other for the current price point. How about that? It looks great on a coffee table. It pulls people in. It has a simple gameplay that can be taught in 3 minutes, and you can teach them the whatever god that you're playing with in another minute and a half. It plays incredibly well. It's simple to play. It's one of those classic. I mean, they have this learn it in 30 seconds, play it for life. I hate that, you know, a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. I hate it. I hate that quote. It's overused. But sometimes it's true, and I think in Santorini, to a certain extent, it is true. Santorini is an elegant, simple system with a tacked-on power thing. I love powers. You watch any of my other videos, I always love powers. I love the mashup of picking 2 gods with their unique abilities and facing them off against each other, and then swapping roles, because inevitably one person will be like, well, your god's power was completely overpowered against mine, it's just an unfair matchup, and then great, swap roles and go back and forth and get a feel for it. It can be incredibly fun to win against somebody with the matchup that they just cried was horribly unfair. Santorini is a game that I thoroughly enjoy. It's a game that I have no regrets about backing. I do wonder if I overpaid for it, because it was, even the Kickstarter version was frequently available for cheaper after the fact in the secondary market. Raised a lot of money, did incredibly well. This was possibly my most expensive, I think this was my most expensive Kickstarter today. I remember putting down like $65 on this and being like scared off. Now, if you watch any of the other Kickstarter videos I do, sadly and unfortunately, $65 no longer scares me off a Kickstarter, but it probably should. But anyways, Santorini was great. This was 2016, and this was actually my only one in 2016. So we are, I guess, 1 for 1 in 2016, and 1 for, well, I'll do a summary of it at the end. Anyways, bringing us to 2017 with Rising Sun. Rising Sun is Rising Sun is by Coolmany or Not. This is my first Command Kickstarter. This is before I got sucked into the whole everything. I loved Blood Rage by now. By the time Rising Sun as a Kickstarter came up, I thoroughly enjoyed Blood Rage. My group and I loved it. We had gotten Blood Rage, by the way. I remember I read a post on Miniature Market about Blood Rage versus Forbidden Stars, which in retrospect, I don't think they're comparable. I guess they're just big games, but I read the post. I thought they were both interesting. I got both. I played Forbidden Stars and traded it away. I actually have it back right now. We'll see how that plays out. But Blood Rage, I ended up playing just because of that post, and my group loved it. We were obsessed with Blood Rage. It is my #1 game of all time at the moment, and it's stayed there for quite some time. It's one of those games I can't sit down when I'm playing it. It's just so tense. And so when they announced the spiritual successor to Blood Rage, I was all in. The same designer, the same company, the same artwork. I believe this was before Eric Lang became officially part of CMON. I think they announced that shortly after this, if I recall. It might have been shortly before, but this is when he was still doing some games with them, but he wasn't officially their head of design or whatnot. But I was all in from the second they announced this, and then sure enough, as the Kickstarter came along, this is my first, I'm going to use the word real, but don't take offense, this is my first real Kickstarter. What I mean by that is, all of these are obviously real Kickstarters, but this is the first one that has that whole pledge goals and miniature porn and all that, every single thing we're just adding, and then new, boom, you can hit more, you hit more, oh look, we raised more funding, we hit more. And I very much bought into it. As a new person in this world, I believe that stretch goals were a completely real thing. I didn't even have the concept of, well, of course they've prepared what's going in the boxes, of course they have some idea. Some of it may be, planned out to an extent, maybe they'll shift what's an optional buy versus what's a stretch goal. There might be some adjustments, but the overall content is of course planned. But I very much bought into it, and it was a fun ride. I paid attention to all the updates, I enjoyed it, and sure enough, this is still in my collection to date. I do wonder whether this will stay in my collection forever. I often wonder that, because while it's a game that I enjoy playing, it's not a game that I consider to be nearly as good as Blood Rage, at least for our group, and because of that, it hasn't hit the table in quite some time. I actually plan on doing another video of games that are on my shelf that I haven't played in a year, and why I'm keeping them, and sadly, Rising Sun is on that list. It's a game that's on my shelf for over a year, and why I'm keeping it, and we'll talk about it more there. But short version is, for right now, it's in my collection. I hope it stays. It's a beautiful game, and there are things about it that I really enjoyed. But it's definitely a game that hasn't hit the table in a while. And Ankh, with Ankh coming out, I did a video on Ankh. If you haven't watched it, I'll link to that above. But with Ankh coming out, it makes it even harder to know, will it stay, will it not, what will be the competitive landscape of my collection for a game like Rising Sun. And so that's Rising Sun, and that is the first game in 2017 that I backed. Which brings us to Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, the second and last game in 2017 that I backed. Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is I think it's the only big box game that Gamelin Games has done. Gamelin Games is known for their Tiny Epic series. Their Kickstarters do phenomenally well. I mean, just look at this. This game over here has $495,000 or whatnot, whereas this is a huge box game. This is an expensive game, versus their newest Kickstarter for Tiny Epic Pirates, which I just covered in my Kickstarter Roundup video. I'll link to that up above. Tiny Epic Pirates has already crossed 500,000 for a much cheaper game, which means far more interest, far more backers, far more people who are interested in that game. Now, don't get me wrong, Heroes of Land, Air, Land, and Sea has done well. $500,000 is nothing to sneeze at. But my point is that Gamelin Games is really known for Tiny Epic. This was their foray into a bigger box game, and they have had multiple Kickstarters for this game. It is a good game. If you look at the ratings on this on Board Game Geek, this is a great game. As far as to what it was for my collection, I got it. I enjoyed it, and keep in mind, this was my, I guess after Rising Sun, this is my second big box game, and this wasn't such a stretch goal journey as much, but rather this was more about, like, just the actual game and the sheer amount of stuff that was in it. It is a game that I kept on my shelf for a while, and then eventually we got to the table a few times. I think Heroes of Air, Land, and Sea is an excellent game. I also no longer own it. There are a handful of games that fit into that category. Offhand, the only two I can think of are Root and Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. Now, Root and both those games, what they share in my mindset, is both of those games are incredible games that aren't worth having in your collection unless you are playing them frequently. Root, because of the asymmetric nature of the game, means there's a lot to teach. It's pretty simple, but there's a lot to teach. There's a lot of rules, even if they are intuitive and even if they are easy to pick up. Root is a game that I don't think is worth owning unless you're playing it at least once every 2 months, at least, preferably more. And I don't know if for my collection I was going to, because of the constant shifting nature of our game group. We have like 3 or 4 regulars, but then we have, and by regular I mean someone who shows up 50% or more of the time, and then we have 6 or 7 people who show up, once every 5 to 6 weeks. That means that a game that, like Root, where you have to reteach the whole game every single time, where I can teach it in an hour as opposed to teaching it in 30 minutes, it makes it hard to get to the table, and I didn't think it was going to be played enough. So Root is an incredible game that I got rid of because it wasn't going to hit the table enough to maximize its potential, to really see what a good game it is. It is a game that very much is on my, when I retire list, when I have more time to play games with more consistent groups, maybe I'll get it back. Or if my game group ever shifts to having like 4 or 5 complete regulars, maybe it'll shift. But for right now, Root left my collection. And Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea was the same way, unfortunately. It was a great game. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The problem is, let me see if I can find over here, they have, you can't see it well, but over here on these player boards, if you see those little squares, each of those white boxes is a different ability, a unique ability. And on each of the 4 factions, they are all unique and different. And then in addition to that, you have your heroes, which all have their own tiers of their abilities and what they can do as well. Which basically means that in this game, the first half of the game, you're just trying to grok. You're just trying to understand your own abilities, your own factions, what you can do. You kind of have to just jump into the game, and then you'll figure out these trees as you play, and then like halfway through your first game, you'll be like, oh, I really should have done that differently. And that would be fine, but then you have to do it for all the opposing factions. And if you have the expansion, there's even more factions. There is so much going on in this game in terms of the abilities to memorize that you're forced to either know a ton of information or kind of play a heavy strategy game half blindly, where one player might know more about the other factions, one player might not. One player may have played that faction and be able to fight you better because they have better understanding, one player might not. It ended up feeling like it was an incredible game, but one that was only worth playing with a dedicated group who would know all these abilities pretty clearly after a few plays. I do highly recommend Heroes of Land and Sea. I think it's an excellent game, and like Root, it's on my imaginary list, not my imaginary, my actual list of games that I want to get back one day. Games I want to get back when I think that my group or my life situation will be in a better state to enjoy it. I really did enjoy it. I think it's an incredible game. It kind of feels almost, I was going to say almost MTG-ish. I don't know, that might be a bit extreme, but the abilities really are fun, and if you did master them, then the knowing which tech trees to take to counter your opponent's strengths would be a lot of fun. This is really a game that, even just talking about it now, kind of makes me want to get it back. I'm not going to for right now, but that is what it is. In terms of my money back, I got my money back on this one. I have no regrets. This is one that I would have said at the time, I think. Obviously it's hindsight, but I probably would have said at the time that this is a safe back. It's by Gameland Games. It definitely was a risk because it was their first big box Kickstarter, but I still think it was one that I would say is probably worth doing. And like I said, I got my money back. I was able to sell this at a profit. I did not get the painted miniature set, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this game. I have no regrets. And that covers 2017. Rising Sun and Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea were 1 for 2 in 2017. Which brings us to 2018 and Dice Throne, the second one on this list by Roxley Games. Dice Throne is one of the most beautiful games I have ever owned. Dice Throne is absolutely gorgeous. The original edition was well done. I had not played the original edition when I backed this. I had heard good things about it, but I hadn't played it. And this took the original edition and made it just far prettier. It is a gorgeous game, an absolutely gorgeous game. I cannot say enough things about how pretty this game is, and I'm kind of upset about how pretty it is because I think I kept it longer than I should have because of that. While I enjoy Dice Throne, while I think it's great, and while I did get my money back on this one, I think Dice Throne is overproduced for what it brings to the table. I think it's beautiful, it's incredible, but ultimately it's two-player Yahtzee. And don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing, but usually you see that in a $30 King of Tokyo as opposed to a $200 or more all-in Dice Throne of getting all the first edition, the second edition, all these heroes. It is overproduced and it is beautiful. Do not get me wrong. For the right person, the right collection, I'm glad this exists. When I say it's overproduced for what it is, I mean for me, for my collection. It is for the right person, for the person who wants this two-player Yahtzee. And again, I do not mean that as an insult. It is a thoroughly enjoyable experience. I think for the right person, this is a beautiful game to own, and I'm happy it exists. For me, I kept it for a long time because of how pretty it was. But at the end of the day, it was a game that I didn't pull out as much because while it's two-player Yahtzee, it's overproduced not just physically, but also the game is overproduced for two-player Yahtzee. There are aspects to knowing each character, to being able to counter each character. So there's this kind of aspect of strategy of knowing how to counter the player you're fighting against. And ideally, if you've played as the samurai, you'll have a better idea countering the samurai because you know which things he does well. At the same time, then you're just playing Yahtzee and rolling dice and hoping you can hit your ultimate and whatnot. It is a good game, but I felt it took too much strategy to be worth playing casually with like just a random whatever when you're bored, and it was not enough strategy to be played really competitively. So over time, I sadly eventually got rid of it, and this is another one that I did get my money back on, so I'm happy with that. But it's beautiful. It's great. I strongly believe that I will get this back when they have the cooperative game. They came up with a cooperative, Dice Throne Season 3 or whatever it was cooperative, or maybe a Season 2.5, I don't remember. It's kind of a cooperative version of Dice Throne where you take the Dice Throne characters and then you kind of play through a Diablo dungeon-style crawl or whatnot. I am sure that I will eventually get that. I did not back it. I was too gun-shy on the Gunslinger. I was too gun-shy from Dice Throne, from having backed a beautiful game and keeping it because of how beautiful it was, that I passed on that expansion in the end, on that Kickstarter. But I'm sure I will get it. I'm sure I'll try it. And then either Dice Throne will re-enter my collection or it won't. One or the other, binary. But it is a beautiful game. Roxley Games has completely upped the ante here. They've almost become like the new Days of Wonder. Days of Wonder used to be the publisher that produced beautiful games. Now most publishers produce beautiful games, not all, but most. It's almost become the new standard. Your game has to be not just, great, but beautiful. But Roxley Games really takes it to the next level. When Roxley Games comes out with a game, it's going to be next level production, next level beautiful. I really do think they are the Days of Wonder of games nowadays, but also with better games. Days of Wonder does have some great games, do not get me wrong, but they do fall more on the lighter side. So I shouldn't say better, I should say heavier games. Anyways, that's Dice Throne. This was my only Kickstarter. It's not true. This is my first Kickstarter of 2 in 2018, and the last one we're really going to go into on this list today, because the next one in 2018 was what started my Kickstarter addiction. This was not the first one that I started looking at from the stance of value. That came a little bit later, but Cthulhu Death May Die was the first Kickstarter that really set off this chain of just backing almost everything that I wanted to, which was a very dangerous journey, and that's when I had to start looking at that value aspect. Cthulhu Death May Die I'll go into on the next video, but it definitely, we'll go into the next video. I'm not going to cover it now. This is the next one we're going to be covering, but this is my journey. This was 2014 to 2018. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Kickstarters that I backed in that time, of which I have kept 2 of them, and I'm not going to go into the value aspect because I didn't keep track back then. I didn't track what happened, what did. For Cthulhu, I have started tracking, but we'll see. But back then, I did not track my Kickstarters. I did not track what I sold. I did not track anything. I didn't track anything about it. I just backed them here and there, and over time, I started shifting away. Like, one thing I didn't talk about, for instance, back to those one nights, is the first time I started getting gun-shy on these games is when I Ultimate Werewolf Daybreak. I have more. I have Vampire. I have Alien. But I did stop backing those because at that point I had already noticed that they were cheaper later. There was no reason for me to get them now when I can get them cheaper down the road. So doing this journey, there was already a starting point where I was starting to think, why should I pay $35 now when I can get it later for $20? So it did start to creep into this aspect, even back as far back as this was in 2015. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. The next one will be, Cthulhu Death May Die onwards, and they'll probably be a little more in depth because I'll start covering, and at a certain point we're going to start playing catch up of games I haven't even gotten yet, which we'll cover as I go through them. This is meant to be a series of videos that not just covers what you should back or shouldn't back, but more importantly, or not more importantly, but differently, it covers what happened after. What, for me personally, was I right about the value proposition? Did I make money on it? Did I break even? Did I lose? Did I keep it? And I don't really care at that point. So yes, I hope you enjoyed. I'm Alex from Board Game Co. You can subscribe down below. You can watch you can watch roughly 90 other videos on this channel about Kickstarter videos, Kickstarter games, board game reviews, board game comparisons, what games are leaving my collection and why. I have all kinds of videos. Check them out on the channel. Subscribe, like. Until next time, have a good one.